The morning I caught my husband cheating. His girlfriend was standing in my kitchen making coffee. Not with the coffee machine on the counter. No, she was using my French press. The glass one my sister shipped to me from a tiny coffee shop in Vermont for my 35th birthday. She had opened my cabinets, found it, scooped the coffee the way I always do, and slowly pressed the handle down like she'd been doing it there for years. Like she belonged there. My husband stood at the kitchen island in his dress shirt scrolling through his phone. Neither of them even looked surprised when I walked in. "Morning," he said casually. Like this was normal. Like 3 people standing in the same kitchen was just part of the morning routine. His girlfriend turned toward me and smiled politely. She was wearing a cream cardigan. My cardigan. The one that had been hanging on the hook by the back door all winter. She looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Like someone who had already decided this was her house now. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter without saying a word. Because over the past few weeks I had learned something important. Silence makes people nervous. Especially people who think they've already won. Finally, my husband cleared his throat. "We should probably talk today. All three of us. All 3 of us." Like we were discussing dinner plans, instead of the fact that he had moved his girlfriend into our house. But here's the part neither of them understood yet. The house they were standing in, the kitchen, the garage, the backyard, legally didn't belong to him. And in about 30 days, both of them were going to find that out in the worst possible way. Because while my husband thought I was just a wife who managed a few rental properties, for the last 10 years, I had been quietly building something he never bothered to understand. And that mistake was about to cost him everything. He thought he was in control. He thought he knew how our life ran. But while he was climbing the corporate ladder, I was quietly building an empire. When we first met, I had a small rental property in East Nashville. One little place I bought before my 27th birthday. He called it charming. I called it smart. By 32, I owned 4 rental units. By 34, I had folded them all into Clearwater Property Group LLC, my company. Every single property legally in my name. He never asked. He never cared. My tenant calls? My renovation plans? My income? Nothing he thought mattered. To him, it was just your little tenant thing. Even the house we lived in, our so-called shared home, was technically mine, owned by my company. He had signed some papers at the closing 4 years ago, but never read them. He hosted dinner parties there. He renovated the kitchen. He bragged to colleagues about the neighborhood, all while standing in a house that legally wasn't his. I didn't plan it as revenge. I didn't want to fight. I just kept building. Slowly, quietly, until the time came when the truth would be unavoidable. And that morning, in the kitchen, that time was almost here. Because this wasn't about anger. This wasn't about shouting or tears. This was about clarity. And the paperwork never lies. In a few short days, he would learn that everything he thought he owned, every luxury he enjoyed, had actually been under my name, my control, my rules. And she had moved in thinking she was winning. But the reality, she was stepping into a house she never really had a claim to. I sipped my water, and I let them think the conversation would go the way he imagined. Little did they know, I had already won. The clock struck noon, and I came downstairs. There she was, sitting at my kitchen table, hands folded like she was auditioning for something. He stood near the window, rehearsed, polished, ready to drop his truth bomb. He told me he was sorry. He told me he had feelings. He told me the house made more sense for them. I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I had already done my homework. I knew exactly what this conversation was, and I was calm. Because I had the papers. 4 days later, a process server rang the doorbell at 7:45 a.m. He handed him. Document. Polite. Precise. A. Notice from Clearwater Property Group, LLC, the legal owner of the house. 30 days to vacate. Not a question, not a plea, not a negotiation. The house I had built, the home he had paraded through as his own, was mine. I watched him read the notice. I watched the disbelief cross his face, the scrambling for an argument, the first flickers of fear. "You can't," he said. I sipped my coffee in the French press I had rescued from his indifference weeks ago. "You can," I said calmly. "It's mine. I own it, legally, fully, completely." He called his brother. He tried to negotiate. I listened. I let him think there was leverage. There wasn't, because the truth doesn't negotiate. The documents don't lie. Every property, every asset, every luxury he had enjoyed under our life together had been mine all along. And in that moment, as he realized it, I felt something quiet. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Something calmer. The peace of finally being seen, finally unshackled, finally in control. 3 weeks into the 30-day period, my phone rang. It was her. The other woman. I almost didn't answer. Almost didn't want to hear her voice. But curiosity won. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because the truth had caught up with her. She asked quietly, almost hesitantly. Did he know? I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said carefully, deliberately, use accent clear and calm. He knew only as much as he chose to. The rest never touched his mind. Click, she hung up. And in that quiet moment I felt it. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Closure. Clarity. Control. My husband moved out shortly after, taking with him only a fraction of the assumptions he had carried into our marriage. The rest he had thought was his, evaporated like smoke. Judith moved the divorce forward. His attorney realized quickly that the financial picture was nothing like he had expected. Each discovery, each document, each spreadsheet reminded him that he had never truly owned a thing he thought he had. The cardigan she had worn, returned, folded on my porch. Small mercies, the trivial symbols of someone trying to claim what they never could. My mother-in-law called me that week. Practical, sharp, no nonsense. She didn't apologize. She acknowledged the truth. She knew the son she had raised. And in her voice, there was understanding, approval, relief. I smiled quietly. I had won. Yes, but more than that. I had protected everything I built, quietly, steadily, for years. 6 months later, I bought another property, a mixed-use building in East Nashville. I walked through it with Rosa, my contractor. She's worked with me for 4 years, and she talks about buildings the way some people talk about people carefully, with attention, knowing what they can hold. This one's got good bones, she said. I smiled. They usually do. You just have to look. I signed the purchase agreement the following week. Another addition to Clearwater Property Group, my portfolio, the one my husband had never truly seen. He had a mental image of me, the part-time worker, the tenant lady, the wife who managed a few rentals. But the reality, 11 years of strategy, growth and independence, all quietly built, all under my name, all mine. And now, finally, the picture matched the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. The slow burn of underestimation had turned into clarity. I knew who I was. I had always known. I just waited for the rest of the world to catch up. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in September. A clear morning, light falling just so, early fall style. I stood outside the East Nashville building, watching Rosa's crew work. Judith texted me, "Done." I didn't call anyone right away. Some moments I decided were better held quietly, fully mine, before letting anyone else inside. That evening, I drove back to Franklin, parked in my driveway, sat for a moment, The house was the same, it had always been mine. Maple turning, porch light coming on automatically, everything exactly how I had set it. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at my kitchen island, looked at the room I had lived in for 4 years. Every detail, every renovation, every choice, it was mine. Fully mine. Finally, completely mine. And I realized, there are women who make noise when they're powerful. That's fine. And there are women like me, quiet builders, patient planners, letting the paperwork do the talking. I had always been the second kind. And now, the world had no choice but to see me. The French press was clean, on the counter where it belonged. I'd poured my coffee, looked out at the quiet neighborhood, and smiled. I had built something lasting, something real. Slowly, carefully, without anyone else needing to see it. And finally, it was finished. Or maybe, it was just fully mine. And that was more than enough.